You see, at the end of the war, the international community decided that Iraq had to get rid of its weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons, etc. And they sent in inspection teams to do it. Now, the initial inspection teams were actually populated by real experts, guys that were biologists, chemists, nuclear physicists, rocket scientists doing their job. They all had really thin necks, really thin arms, pale white skin because they've never been outside of a laboratory. And they didn't know how to really talk to people. They'd sort of beep at them. Beep. Beep. And they went into Iraq to do their job. And they're pretty good, except the Iraqis weren't playing the game. You see, beep. The Iraqi goes, that's the sound effect, by the way, of a round being chambered into an AK-47 as the Iraqi guard points it at the inspector and says, "You're not welcome here." Beep. And that's how the inspections went initially. Not very good. So now they have to revamp the inspection process. And I get a phone call and they say, "We want to invite you into this process. We need you to come in and come up with a new approach to weapons inspections." You see, we tried the gentleman way, we tried the expert way, and now they have to rely on what I was really trained at doing. See, I'm not an arms control specialist, really. I'm not a biologist, a chemist, a rocket scientist, a physicist. I'm a spy. I'm trained to acquire information in denied areas. Data that people don't want me to have, I get. And now we have a situation where the Iraqis have decided to hold on to prohibited capability and deny UN weapons inspectors access to this capability. So I was brought in to create the conditions in which we can gain access to this information. And that's what I did. And we did a darn good job of it. The Iraqis were lying to us in 1991. By 1995, we could account for 95 to 98% of Iraq's WMD capability. And they did not go gently in that good night. It's not as though the Iraqis rolled over and said, "Here's the information." We had to earn this. You guys seen that show? Are you familiar with the CSI? You've seen CSI Las Vegas, CSI Miami. They're always in really cool places. We were CSI Baghdad. We weren't as good looking as the people on TV, but we're 10 times better. We did a good job. The Iraqis, I liken them to like drug dealers who flush the drugs down the toilet. You know, the cops come in, raid the house, bang, bang, police, we're coming in, flush the drugs. And on the drugs go. And now the cops come in and they say, "Where are the drugs?" And the drug dealers give an honest statement. "There are no drugs in this house." The cops say, "Where are the drugs you had?" Now they lie. "We never had any drugs in this house." Well, this is the Iraqis. You see, we're hot on their tail. So in the summer of 1991, they blow up all their WMD and bury it underground without telling us. So we say, "Where's your WMD that you're hiding from us?" "There is no WMD in Iraq." An honest statement. "Well, where's the stuff that you were hiding from us?" "We were never hiding WMD from us." That's a lie. So now we have to forensically reconstruct the Iraqi weapons programs and prove to the Iraqis that in fact they had weapons that they failed to declare. The Iraqis admit that they had lied, but now instead of giving us actual weapons, they have to give us bits and pieces. They tried to hide 98 missiles from us. Instead of giving us 98 missiles, we went to a desert field that had nothing. We had to dig down, become forensic archaeologists, pull the stuff up from the ground, the little bits and pieces of missiles. We had to take the serial numbers off the missiles. We had to go to Russia that produced the missiles, match each serial number with a component, each component to a production log that put it to a missile, and then take it to an invoice that shipped it to Iraq. And after reconstructing that, we could account for 96 of 98 missiles. Pretty good. Pretty good. I went to the CIA and reported that we were closing the books on the Iraqi missiles, that we could account for them all. The director of the CIA went to the Congress of the United States and said, "We think that there's 200 missiles left in Iraq." I went, "Wait a minute, I just told you there's none." He said, "No, there's 200. I said, "Well, how do you know that?" He said, "I can't tell you, it's secret." I said, "Wrong answer, Bubba. That dog don't hunt." I run the intelligence program for the international community. You're saying there's 200 missiles? You're going to have to tell me how you know this. So they gave me the information. Really special. It's buried in the ground. Buried under rivers. Buried in mountains. Under lakes. Buried. But then they made a mistake. They told me exactly where they thought they were buried. So I called their bluff. $12.5 million U.S. taxpayer money later, we had ground penetrating radar built just for us, put on helicopters. We took it to Iraq. We flew it all over Iraq. How many missiles do you think we found? None. Zero. Went back in '93, reported to the director of the CIA and said, "There are no missiles left in Iraq. We're back to our original assessment." Director of the CIA told me to leave the office. Called my boss and said, "That Ritter's a clever little kid. We agree, there's not 200 missiles." 2 missiles. 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 2 There's 12 to 20, and that number will never change, no matter what you inspectors do. That's when we came face to face with the reality that the United States of America wasn't concerned about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, that they had another agenda, and that agenda was removing Saddam Hussein from power. The weapons inspections were only useful insofar as they facilitated regime change, that the whole WMD thing was a fraud, a farce, because we had disarmed Iraq, but the U.S. government would not recognize our work. In 1993, we could determine that we could account for all of Iraq's ballistic missile capability. In 1994, we could say the same thing about Iraq's nuclear capability. In 1995, we could say the same thing about their chemical weapons capability. In 1996, we can make the same claim about their biological weapons capability. 95 to 98% of Iraq's known weapons of mass destruction capacity was accounted for. There was some unaccounted for material, not because Iraq was hiding it, because they blew it up in the way they did. We couldn't forensically reconstruct this stuff. But to mitigate against the uncertainties of this unaccounted for material, we put forward that we had in place since 1994 the most technologically advanced, intrusive arms control regime in the history of arms control, blanketing the totality of Iraq's industrial infrastructure. There wasn't a factory in Iraq of any given capability that we weren't monitoring, and I could guarantee you that they neither retained prohibited capability there, nor were they reconstituting prohibited capability. Iraq was fundamentally disarmed, but we weren't allowed to make that conclusion, because the game was not disarmament. The game was regime change. And that's one of the reasons why I resigned in 1998. I was called before the United States Senate. I was questioned by the senators, especially those Democrats who were concerned that my speaking out was hurting the Democratic President, Bill Clinton. Remember, long before George W. Bush lied to us about WMD in Iraq, Bill Clinton invented the lie about WMD in Iraq. This isn't a Democratic problem or a Republican problem, ladies and gentlemen. It's an American problem. So I get challenged by Joe Biden, who says, "Who are you to speak out? Don't you think you're operating above your pay grade?" Perhaps I didn't have stars on my shoulder. I used to have a little bronze oak leaf, major, but I wasn't a major. I was just there as the most important pay grade America's ever seen. You see, with all due respect to Joe Biden and the other senators who tried to denigrate my qualifications to speak out, not only was I a former weapons inspector, a chief weapons inspector who ran the intelligence programs, meaning that there wasn't anything the CIA knew that I didn't know. There wasn't anything the Mossad knew that I didn't know, because I spent a lot of time in Israel, spent a lot of time in Germany, in France, in England. I knew it all. But that's not what gave me the credibility to speak before the Senate. See, Joe Biden and others, you're just senators. I'm an American citizen, and that's the best pay grade anybody can ever give me.